The atmosphere in the Forrester design studio had always been one of controlled chaos, with the hum of fabric, scissors, and brainstorming sessions filling the air. But on that fateful day, the air was heavy with tension. Rich Forrester had just returned from a brief meeting with Brooke, his mind swirling with thoughts of their life together, the future they were on the verge of creating. His phone buzzed sharply, shattering his brief moment of peace. The text read, "Eric collapsed at the design studio." His heart skipped a beat, and in that instant, everything around him seemed to blur. He rushed to the studio, each step driven by a dread he couldn't explain. As he entered, the sight that met him was nothing short of horrifying. Eric, the father he had always respected and sometimes resented, was sprawled on the floor, a few of the Forrester designers and staff surrounding him in a frantic attempt to revive him. Ridge's chest tightened as he knelt beside his father, his mind racing with the crushing realization that this could be it, the moment he could lose the man who had built the Forrester empire, the man who had shaped his every move for good. The doctors had arrived within minutes, but Ridge couldn't tear his eyes away from Eric's still form. His breath came in ragged gasps, and the tight grip he had on his father's hand seemed futile against the creeping weight of mortality. Ridge was a man who had battled through many things in his life, betrayals, love lost, corporate wars, but never had he felt so helpless. The reality hit him like a ton of bricks. For all his strength, for all his power within the Forrester world, he was still just a son, watching helplessly as his father might slip away forever. The ambulance ride to the hospital felt endless, each second like an eternity. Ridge's mind was in turmoil, torn between what his father had built and what his heart longed for Brooke, the woman who had stolen his heart and ignited a passion in him that could no longer be ignored. As the ambulance doors swung open and the emergency team whisked Eric into the hospital, Ridge stood frozen, staring after them, wondering just how much longer the fragile grip he had on his father and on the Forrester legacy would hold. It was in that moment of desperate uncertainty that the true weight of Eric's empire came crashing down on Ridge's shoulders. He wasn't just the son of the patriarch. He was the one who was expected to carry the torch forward, to lead Forrester Creations into the next generation. But would he be able to? Or would he abandon it all for a life with Brooke? The question gnawed at him, and it wasn't just any question, it was the question that would define his future. After what felt like hours, Ridge was finally allowed into Eric's room. The older man lay unconscious, connected to various machines, his body fragile and vulnerable. It was as though the man who had always been a rock in Ridge's life was now reduced to a shadow of his former self. Ridge sat by his father's side, the sterile white of the hospital room around him making everything feel more surreal. His thoughts raced back to their conversation in the design studio not long ago, the words that had come from Eric's lips ringing louder in his ears now than ever before. When Eric regained some consciousness and his gaze met Ridge's, there was no hint of the usual patriarchal strength. Instead, there was something softer, more vulnerable, almost pleading. "Ridge," Eric rasped, his voice hoarse, "I don't have much time left." Ridge leaned forward, his heart heavy. "Dad, don't say that. You're going to get through this. You've gotten through so much more." Eric's eyes searched Ridge's face for a long moment before he spoke again, his voice low but resolute. "I don't have much time, son. And when I'm gone, you will need to take over. Forrester needs a leader, and it's always been you, Ridge. But there's something you must do first. Before you take the seat of CEO, before you carry on this legacy, there's one thing I need from you. You have to bring Brooke back into the family. You need to make it official. You need to make it clear to everyone that Brooke is the woman who will stand by your side, in the boardroom and in your life." Ridge's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Eric's words were like a chain wrapped around his heart. Brooke, the woman Ridge had loved for years, the woman he had given up everything for, was now the final condition in Eric's grand design. But Ridge's heart was torn between two conflicting forces. The Forrester legacy was as much a part of him as his blood, and the responsibility he felt to it was like a weight he could not shake. But at the same time, the love he had for Brooke, the love that had burned hotter and stronger every day since they first met, was undeniable. He had already made a choice in his heart, but his father's words weighed heavily. How could he reconcile this final, pivotal request? Eric had always been clear in his expectations, but this was different. This was no longer about family unity, it was about securing Forrester's future. Eric was asking Ridge to publicly declare his commitment to Brooke, to tie himself to her in the eyes of the world. For the Forrester legacy to remain intact, Ridge was being asked to make an official choice, Brooke or the Empire. Ridge, Eric continued, his voice faint but determined, if you want to lead Forrester, if you want to carry this company forward, you need to show the world that Brooke is your partner, that she's the one who stands beside you. You need to make it official before anything else. It's the only way. Ridge sat back in his chair, his mind spinning with the implications of his father's request. Could he really do it? Could he bring Brooke back into the fold of Forrester Creations, knowing that doing so would not only bind her to the corporate empire he had spent his life creating, but also pull her into the very chaos that had defined his existence? Ridge knew the stakes were higher than ever. Eric's words hung over him like a dark cloud. He had to act quickly, and there was no room for hesitation. The Forrester family needed stability, and Eric's vision depended on it. Ridge's legacy, his very identity, had always been tied to the family name, to the company that had defined his success, and to the expectations placed upon him by his father. The weight of it all crashed down on him as he looked at his unconscious father, wondering if this was truly the end of an era. In the space between the love he had for Brooke and the legacy that was his birthright, Ridge found himself at an impossible crossroads. How could he reconcile his heart with his duty? As he sat in the sterile hospital room, the future of Forrester hanging by a thread, Ridge realized that he could no longer run away from the impossible choice before him. The very future of the company and his future with Brooke depended on the decision he was about to make. Would he give up his heart's desire to secure his father's empire, or would he put his love for Brooke first, no matter the cost? The choice was his alone, and it was a choice that would define not just his legacy, but the future of Forrester Creations and everyone connected to it. Ridge stood by his father's side, silently promising to honor his request. But as he did, a new question emerged in his mind. Would he be able to find a way to balance the life he wanted with the life his father demanded? Would it be possible to have both Brooke and the Empire, or would the weight of the Forrester legacy finally tear him apart? The events that unfolded in Los Angeles had shaken the very core of Taylor Hayes. She had spent years tangled in the complicated web of love and loyalty that had bound her to Ridge, a love that had once been pure and unwavering. But that all came crashing down when she witnessed Ridge risk his life to save Brooke, his one true love, the woman who had always been the other side of the triangle that had defined their lives. For Taylor, the moment Ridge jumped in without hesitation to rescue Brooke from danger was the final nail in the coffin of a relationship that had been slowly unraveling. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and the truth, hard and unforgiving, revealed itself clearly. Their time was over. Her heart ached, but it also knew that the chapter had closed for good. The deep connection that had once been a bond of love and hope was now just a memory, a reminder of the fragile nature of their emotions and the impossibility of living in the past. There was no longer a place for Taylor in the tangled mess of Ridge and Brooke's lives, and Taylor knew it was time for her to step away. With her heart broken, but her resolve stronger than ever, she made the difficult decision to leave Los Angeles behind. She accepted an invitation to teach at a renowned psychological institute in Rome, seeking solace in the distance and hoping that the change of scenery might help her heal and rediscover herself. As she boarded the plane to Rome, Taylor left behind the city that had been both her home and her battleground. She left the ghosts of past relationships, the echoes of Brooke's presence in Ridge's life, and the shattered remnants of her own heart. But most of all, she left with the hope that time and distance would allow her to find herself again and, in doing so, make peace with the woman she had become. Upon arriving in Rome, Taylor was greeted with the warm embrace of a new world, one that promised growth and the chance to rebuild. The ancient city's streets, lined with history and culture, seemed to whisper to her in a language of healing and renewal. She dove into her work at the Institute, teaching courses on psychology, human behavior, and relationships. But even in the midst of her academic work, Taylor couldn't escape the scars that lingered beneath her professional demeanor. Rome became her sanctuary, but it was also a place where she had to confront the ghosts of her past. It was at the Institute where Taylor first met Marco, a battle-hardened war doctor who had seen more pain and suffering than most people could ever fathom. Marco's presence was commanding, and yet there was a quiet vulnerability about him that drew Taylor in. He carried the weight of his past like a badge of honor, his body marked with the scars of his experiences. Marco was a man who had dedicated his life to helping others, but beneath his steely exterior, he had his own wounds, both visible and hidden. His journey through war and its aftermath had left him grappling with a sense of lost purpose, a sense that he had given everything and still had not found peace. Taylor found herself intrigued by Marco. Their conversations, often centered around the human condition, psychology, and the effects of trauma, started as professional exchanges but quickly evolved into something more. Their shared experiences of loss and heartache created a deep connection between them. Marco's understanding of pain mirrored her own, and Taylor began to see in him not just a colleague, but someone who could help her rediscover her sense of self-worth. As their relationship deepened, Taylor began to open up in ways she hadn't in years. Marco didn't ask her to forget her past. Instead, he encouraged her to confront it head-on, to face the pain she had been running from, and to find the strength to move forward. With Marco by her side, Taylor slowly started to heal. He helped her to see that she was more than just a woman caught in the web of Ridge and Brooke's love story. She was a person in her own right, with her own dreams, desires, and capabilities. For the first time in years, Taylor felt the weight of the past lifting. She found herself laughing again, her heart growing lighter with each passing day. Marco, too, found solace in their relationship, as Taylor's presence began to fill the empty spaces he had long kept hidden. The two became inseparable, their bond growing stronger as they supported each other in ways neither had ever imagined. As the months passed, Taylor found herself finally standing on solid ground. She was no longer the woman who had been torn apart by a love triangle, no longer the woman who had watched as Ridge chose Brooke time and time again. Instead, she was a woman who had rebuilt herself, a woman who had learned to stand tall in her own skin, free from the expectations of others. But even as Taylor embraced this newfound strength, she knew there was unfinished business waiting for her back in Los Angeles. It had been months since she had left, and while Rome had been the healing balm she needed, there was a part of her that knew the time had come to return, not as the broken woman who had left, but as someone different, someone who had found herself again. Marco, ever the steadfast partner, supported her decision to return to Los Angeles. He understood that this was part of Taylor's journey, and he knew that whatever she faced there, she would no longer be the same woman who had walked away from the heartbreak of her past. With Marco's encouragement, Taylor booked her flight back to the city that had once been her home, but now felt like a place of old wounds and new possibilities. She was determined to return to Los Angeles not with resentment or bitterness, but with a renewed sense of hope. She was ready to face Brooke. Not with hatred or envy, but with the belief that love could be something pure and true, something not defined by the past, but by the future. The moment Taylor stepped off the plane in Los Angeles, she felt the weight of the city press against her. But this time, it wasn't the weight of heartbreak and loss, it was the weight of a new beginning. She had come back to face what was left behind, but now she did so with the clarity of someone who had healed, someone who had learned to love herself again. And as she walked through the familiar streets of Los Angeles, she found herself thinking about the life that awaited her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer the woman caught between Ridge and Brooke. She was no longer defined by their love triangle. She was Taylor Hayes. A woman who had found strength in her own journey, a woman who had learned that true love begins with loving oneself. She was ready to face Brooke, not as an adversary, but as a woman who had come to understand that love could be both complex and beautiful, and that sometimes the greatest love story was the one you built for yourself.